Alright folks, just first off I want to say my good camera ran out of battery juice, so we gotta use Karen's crappy old silver camera that's like 10 fucking years old or something like that. So the resolution is not really quite as good, but you know, I think you could all do without seeing every fucking pore and blackhead on my face, so we'll just proceed. Trying to get through some more reviews of the books. The books I'm reviewing aren't necessarily the best books I've read, but they're books I've read recently, and I prefer to do some like research before I do any reviews or anything like that. But like I think I've said in some of the previous videos, internet's down temporarily, so I can't do any research. So I'm just having to rely on my own faulty memory to try to, you know, just conjure up as much information as I can about the books I'm going to review. And of course I've read the books as well, but you know, I don't want to just like, you know, reveal all the details of the particular work in question, but give you some interesting background information. Anyway, here's a very interesting book. It's sort of an anthology by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who you might all know as the author of Sherlock Holmes, which is, you know, excellent series of books. I used to have a book with all the Sherlock Holmes stories in it, and it had all the original illustrations, and that was a good. Since I bought another anthology of Sherlock Holmes stories, but unfortunately it doesn't have the original illustrations, and you know, I like the old illustrations. This one's illustrated too, but I guess it's illustrated by one of the author's relatives' friends, and so the illustrations are like not very good. You know, here's one, The Terror of Blue John Gap. So you can kind of see it's amateurish sort of pen and ink work. So obviously they didn't pick the best man for the job. They picked someone who, I guess, they owed a favor to or something, dabbled in art. But anyway, this is a very interesting selection of stories, because Arthur Conan Doyle, although he's best known for his Sherlock Holmes stories, who I think the Sherlock Holmes is based on a character by Edgar Allan Poe. I think it was Dupin. I can't remember, but he was a French detective who used his amazing powers of deductive reasoning to solve crimes. The story associated with that is The Murders of Rue Morgue, which was a very bizarre story where you find these people all like sliced up, and he found out that that crime was actually done by a crazed escaped orangutan. Very interesting story. It's like the victims found with their faces all chopped up. They said that apparently the orangutan grabbed his victims and was imitating the motions of a barber shaving somebody he saw and sliced up their face. Anyway, pretty gruesome. But this is basically a compilation of his gruesome stories, or actually a lot of them have like an occult twist to them, because Arthur Conan Doyle was also a big believer in the occult, you know, like all the seances that were popular back then, you know, experimental ways they were trying to communicate with the dead, ghosts and all that kind of stuff. He was really big on that stuff, if you can believe it. And so there's some very interesting stories in here. I mean, some of them, although they're very intriguing and charming, they're also kind of dated, because science has progressed to the point where like a lot of these stories are, well, this one in particular I'm thinking of it's pure fantasy. There's no way it can happen. It's called The Horror of the Heights, which was the first story in the book, and I thought was the most picturesque. I mean, you could probably get some good ideas for artwork out of this one. About this guy, this is like the early part of the 20th century, where they're making the planes better and people are able to fly for longer periods of time and higher. And apparently this guy, he flies so high up above the stratosphere, and there's this whole other ecosystem up there with all these like ethereal creatures living up there, you know, floating on the breezes and stuff like that. And apparently there's sort of like a species of creature up there that's a little bit more corporal than the rest of them, and it leaves an oily film behind it, and actually killed an aeroplane guy previous to this guy going on his adventure and documenting all the bizarre life forms he saw living up on the outer layers of the Earth's atmosphere. Like I said, it's like we know, of course now know that's, you know, not unlikely, but impossible. But at that time, they didn't know. So, and so yeah, and that illustration I showed you, that picture of that cave, that was a story about some big monster that lived under the earth and would come up on the full moon and like attack sheep. And apparently, what sparked this guy's adventure into the bowels of the earth was, I guess, some person had gone missing or something. It was like some bear type creature that must have wandered down under the ground like hundreds of thousands of years ago and evolved into some kind of strange creature with big like mole eyes and claws, and it would come up when the moon was full because the light hurt its eyes and go hunting for sheep and people and whatnot. So yeah, so very not all the stories are like, you know, gruesome or even occult based. You know, there's one called the Jew's Breastplate. It's a pretty unlikely premise though, about this guy who like was a curator of a museum, and he found out that some of the jewels in ancient Israelite breastplate were actually being taken out and replaced in the dead of night. And the museum had just changed hands, and the present curator decided to just stay in the museum at night and catch the guy in the act, because they didn't know how he was getting in. And it was the old curator who would hide it in a mummy case until everybody left, and go and pry the jewels out of the breastplates and then replace them with the authentic jewels, because he felt the reputation of the museum was at stake. And then you think like, well, why the hell didn't the guy just like secretly tell the new curator? And they could have switched them anyway. But yeah, so not. But most of the stories are frightfully, you know, clever and put together very well. That one is an unfortunate lapse in his creativity, I suppose. But oh, the man with the watches, that's certainly a Sherlock Holmes type story. This doesn't have Sherlock Holmes in it, but it has that whole like, you know, strange like event happening, and then he like kind of explains how it was, and then it all makes sense, you know, even though it initially sounded very bizarre and otherworldly. But yeah, it's called Tales of Terror and Mystery. I think it's been in print since the early 70s, and you know, this one I think is a discarded library book, but you know, you can find this book online. So that's my brief book review for today. See you guys.